Jai Shri Gurudev. Welcome to Department of Studies in Zoology. This is for 5th semester Zoology, discipline specific elective 1A. The title of the paper is Endocrinology and Reproduction. There are 6 units, 3 from endocrinology and 3 from reproduction. In the endocrinology part, we will be studying the human endocrine system, in which the types of hormones, role of hormones in homeostasis, morphology, hormones and their actions of various endocrine glands, types of hormone receptors, mechanism of hormone action, and human endocrine disorders. In reproduction, we will be studying reproductive physiology, hormonal control of reproduction, modern trends in human reproduction, and histology of various organs. Let us move on to the first unit, that is human endocrine system. As we know, the entire body is controlled by something. We are controlled. There are two systems which are controlling our body. The first one is the electricity and another one is the chemicals. Electricity means the electrical impulses. The electrical impulses are present in the nervous system. That is, the electrical impulses are given out from the central nervous system, that is from the brain, then on to spinal cord, and that will be distributed by the peripheral nervous system, and which reach the target organ or the system or the cells, and accordingly the system works. This is electrical control. Another controlling system is by means of chemical messengers or the hormones, and that is known as endocrine system. And there are various organs which are located in the body of various parts, which secrete some of the chemical substances called the hormones, and which are carried by the blood streams, or which may be having their action on their own cell or the neighboring cells or the cells at a distance. And these are the hormones or chemical in their nature, and therefore these are controlling with the help of chemical substance. uh, we can say we are also controlled by the chemicals, that is the hormones. And in human endocrine system, there are various endocrine glands which are located in the brain, like hypothalamus, pituitary, thyroid gland, parathyroid gland, adrenal gland, which is present at the apex of the kidney, and in the abdomen, which is the pancreas, which majorly involved in the blood glucose homeostasis. And for the reproduction, in case of male, the testis; in case of female, it is the ovary, and the placental hormones, These are the some of the examples and of endocrine glands and which are involving in the secretions, and the secretions are chemical in nature and biochemicals, and which involve in the control of the main body system, physiologically which is controlling, and sometimes emotionally also, uh, we are controlled by these chemical system. In total, in this class, and we will be studying the human endocrine system. In today's class of human endocrine system, we will be discussing some of the concepts of autocrine, paracrine, endocrine secretions. That is, we'll be discussing the difference between these, that is autocrine, paracrine, and endocrine. Later, we will be discussing the types of hormones, and finally, we'll be discussing the role of hormones in homeostasis with two examples. Let us understand the terms autocrine, paracrine, and endocrine. Auto, as we know, which means self. Para means which is the neighboring, near. Para means nearby, and endo means within. What is autocrine secretion, or what is autocrine signaling? When a cell signals to the cell itself using chemical messenger, then the type of signaling is known as autocrine action. That is, a cell gives out some chemical substance, and the same chemical substance are received or reacted with the receptors present over the same cell. If it is so, then that type of signaling is known as autocrine signaling. If when a cell signals to neighboring cell or cells located nearby using chemical messenger, then that type of signaling is known as paracrine. That is, one particular cell gives out chemical substances, nothing but the hormones, and for these hormones, receptors present over the surface of the cells which are present nearby. That is, in a same organ, there will be secretion by some of the cells of the organs, and the secretions, that the hormones targets on the other cells of the same organ, or we can say which is nearby cells of the organs. Then this type of action is known as paracrine signaling. In endocrine signaling, chemical messengers, nothing but the hormones, travel to target cells via the bloodstream. That is, the secretions are found in a gland or the cells, and the target cells are at a distance. The hormones are secreted by one system or one type of or one group of cells, and these hormones are given out or poured into the bloodstream, and by the blood circulation the hormones are circulated throughout the body, and these hormones are received or interacted with the targeting cells which are located far apart in the human system is known as endocrine action or endocrine signaling. The classification of hormones is determined by their origin and not by the type of their function, which means that they are classified on the basis of their origin, that is, from which type of biomolecule they are get originated. On the basis they are classified, not on the basis of their function, the mode of their action. They are not classified. They are classified on the basis of their origin. Therefore, chemically there are three categories of hormones may be recognized. The first category of hormones are protein or peptide hormones. The second category is steroid hormones. The third category is amino acid derivative. There are number of endocrine organs which secrete hormones that are chemically made up of proteins or large polypeptides, and those are called peptide hormones or protein hormones. And these peptide hormones are water soluble, and therefore they can be easily transported in the bloodstream. But there is a limitation that they cannot easily pass through lipid rich cell membranes, because the cell is covered with plasma membrane. The plasma membrane A is having two layers of lipids, therefore, which is hydrophobic, and these hormones are water soluble and cannot be easily cross across these lipid membranes. Therefore, peptide and protein hormones are packed in vesicles in the cells that make them. And these hormones, which are uh, secreted in the cells, are packed or enclosed in a vesicle, and then they are released by exocytosis, pinching of the cell membrane, and in the form of vesicles. Inside the vesicles, there will be protein hormones, and that will be carried in the form of vesicles. Some of the examples are insulin, glucagon. This insulin and glucagon hormone is necessary for the glucose homeostasis. Prolactin hormone, ACTH, gastrin, parathyroid hormone. These are some of the examples for the peptide hormones. And another category is the steroid hormone. Some of the hormones are derived from cholesterol, and they are called steroid hormones. They are lipid soluble and can easily dissolve in and pass through cell membrane. They are lipid soluble, fat soluble hormones, and therefore they can easily dissolve in and pass through cell membranes. Since this is fat soluble, and the plasma membrane of the cell is also made up of fat layers or lipid bilayers, therefore same type of molecules are allowed to get in. Therefore it is easier for the steroid hormone uh, to get into the cell membranes. Therefore steroid hormones are not packed in vesicles, unlike the peptide hormones which are packed in the vesicles. There is no necessity for the steroid hormones to part in the vesicle. Instead, they simply diffuse out of the cell that make them as they are synthesized. Some of the steroidal hormones are cortisol, aldosterone, and the reproductive hormones like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, etc. The last category is amino acid derivative. Two important groups of hormones are the derivatives of the amino acids, that is, the amino acid tyrosine and phenylalanine. Some amino hormones are water soluble and others are lipid soluble. Thus, their mode of release differs accordingly. Thyroxine and triiodothyronine are iodinated derivatives of tyrosine amino acid, and this hormone is secreted by thyroid gland. Catecholamines called adrenaline and noradrenaline are produced by adrenal medulla, and these adrenaline and noradrenaline are derived from phenylalanine. Therefore, the uh, origin is from tyrosine or from phenylalanine. Tyrosine and phenylalanine are the amino acids. So if the hormones are derived from the amino acid like tyrosine and phenylalanine, then they are grouped under amino acid derivative hormones. Suppose if the hormones are derived from cholesterol, that is the fat source, then they are called steroid hormones. If the hormones are um, secreted or originated or derived from the polypeptide chains of amino acid or the proteins, then they are called peptide hormones. This is the classification of the hormones. Let us move on to the last topic of today's class, that is a role of hormones in homeostasis. What do you mean by homeostasis? Homeostasis is the regulation of the internal condition within cells and the whole organism, such as temperature, water, and sugar level, etc. Homeostasis means nothing but the balancing of the temperature between the outer environment and the inner body temperature, the water salinity of the body fluid or the cell cytoplasm and the environment, or the sugar level, it should be in a normal. Likewise, the temperature, pH, the heartbeat rate, the water concentration, sugar level. Likewise, various factors must be in a balanced manner, then only the animal or the organism can be called as normal state. For that matter, some of the hormones also involved for the balancing. The hormones which are responsible for key homeostatic processes uh, include the control of blood glucose levels. Another one is the control of blood pressure. Let us take one of the examples in which hormones play a major role in the homeostasis, that is glucose homeostasis. For the glucose homeostasis, the major two hormones required are the insulin and the glucagon hormone. And these hormones are secreted by the endocrine cells of the pancreas. Basically, pancreas is called a dual organ which acts as both endocrine as well as exocrine gland. The endocrine part of the pancreas is islets of Langerhans. The exocrine part is the acinar cells, and these acinar cells involve in the secretion of pancreatic juice which are necessary for the digestion. And in between these acinar cells, here and there, scattered cell groups are present, and those are called islands or islets of Langerhans. These islets of Langerhans consist of four basic types of cells: alpha cells, beta cells, gamma cells, and PP cells, pancreatic polypeptide cells, in which the alpha and beta cells play a major role in the balancing of glucose level in the blood. Look at the cycle at the upper side. That is, suppose if the blood glucose level is high, that is immediately after the food, after having the food, and the food which is rich with carbohydrate sources, then there will be rise in the blood glucose level, and that will be the stimulus for the beta cells of the pancreas. And the beta cells of the pancreas are stimulated with the increasing level of blood glucose, and therefore these beta cells of islets of Langerhans release a protein hormone known as insulin. And this protein hormone insulin is secreted into the bloodstream. And this insulin induce or make the body cells to take up more and more glucose, or uptaking of the glucose will be enhanced by this insulin for the body cells. Thereby, glucose level is decreasing. Slowly, glucose uptaking will be there by the body cells, and glucose level keeps on reducing. And majorly, which acts on liver to take up glucose and store it as glycogen, which is the reserve food material. The major portion of the excess glucose will be stored as a reserve food material, that is glycogen. In case of animal, which is glycogen, is the reserve food source of carbohydrate. Now, with the storage in the liver and more uptaking of the glucose by the body cells, the excess blood glucose concentration will come down to the normal level. Suppose if a person undergoes a starvation and there will be no more glucose in the bloodstream, which means there will be a declining of the glucose concentration in the blood, then in that case the alpha cells of the islets of Langerhans of pancreas get stimulated, and this stimulation release the glucagon hormone from the alpha cells of islets of Langerhans into the bloodstream. This glucagon hormone majorly act on the liver because we know during the increased glucose concentration, major portion of the glucose gets stored up in the liver, and this glucagon hormone act on the liver to break down the glycogen, the polysaccharide form glycogen, and thereby which release the glucose into the blood, and now the blood glucose level rises to the normal l- point, and this is how these two hormones, insulin and glucagon, hand in hand work together for the glucose level balancing in the blood, that is glucose homeostasis. These are the major two hormones for the glucose homeostasis. Let us move on to one more example for the role of hormones, that is the hormones in blood pressure, and which is the renin, angiotensin, and aldosterone. Blood pressure also to be in a normal range. It should be 120 over 80. If it is more than this, which will lead to hypertension. If it is less than this, which will lead to another condition known as hypotension, low BP or high BP, hypertension, high BP. It should be in a normal range, that is 120 over 80 mmHg. For this, hormones play a major role that is explained here, which is renin, angiotensin, aldosterone. This renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system proceeds through several steps to produce angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2. This angiotensin 2 acts to stabilize blood pressure and volume of the blood. This particular renin is secreted by a part of juxtaglomerular complex of kidney nephrons, produced by the granular cells of the afferent and efferent arterioles. Renin is secreted by juxtaglomerular complex of the kidney tubules, that is afferent and efferent arterioles. Thus, kidney controls blood pressure and blood volume directly, and this renin, secreted renin, acts on angiotensinogen, which is given as angiotensin there, which is nothing but angiotensinogen, inactive form. Renin acts on this angiotensinogen. This particular angiotensinogen is made in the liver and which is converted into angiotensin 1 by the activity of renin. And then angiotensin converting enzyme, ACE, angiotensin converting enzyme, converts angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2, and this angiotensin 2 raises blood pressure by constricting blood vessels, which has a direct effects and which cause arteries to constrict. Therefore, the diameter of the artery decreases, and which results in increasing in the blood pressure, the volume, and decreases glomerular filtration rate, resulting in the water retention, and therefore the volume increases, and which also responsible for the behavioral action, that is increase behavioral physiological action, that is increases thirst. The thirst increases, more and more fluid will be taken by the animal, and with the constriction of the arteries there will be pressure increasing, uh, decreation of the glomerular filtration, which conserve the water, thereby the blood pressure and the volume is maintained by the angiotensin 2. And also this angiotensin 2 triggers the release of the mineralocorticoid, that is aldosterone, from the adrenal cortex. The adrenal gland, which is located over the apex of the kidney, in that adrenal cortex is provoked to secrete mineralocorticoid aldosterone hormone, and this in turn stimulates the renal tubule to reabsorb more and more sodium and water, thereby which increase the blood volume. The angiotensin induce the secretion of the aldosterone from the adrenal gland, and thereby these aldosterone act over the kidney tubules and involve in the reabsorption of more sodium ions and water, and thereby the volume of the blood increases. In another way, angiotensin 2 also triggers the release of antidiuretic hormone, that is ADH, from the hypothalamus, that is the master endocrine gland. Hypothalamus ADH is secreted with the action of angiotensin 2, which leads to water retention in the kidneys, that is water conservation in the kidneys. It acts directly on the nephrons, and it decreases glomerular filtration rate, thereby the water content is reabsorbed, and reabsorption leads to increasing volume of the blood. And once again the sodium reabsorption will be induced by the antidiuretic hormone, thereby this is um, blood pressure and the blood volume is maintained with the action of angiotensin, renin, and aldosterone. Medically, the um, for the patients, blood pressure can be controlled by administrating some of the drugs, actually which are inhibiting the ACE, that is angiotensin converting enzyme. These drugs or inhibit the action of the angiotensin converting enzyme, and thereby the conversion of angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2 is prevented. Therefore, in the hyper blood pressure, this will lead to decretion by administering ACE inhibitors. ANP, nothing but atrial natriuretic peptide hormones, lower the blood pressure. This angiotensin, renin, and aldosterone are the hormones which increase the blood pressure and the volume, whereas ANP, atrial natriuretic peptide hormones, lower the blood pressure by acting as a vasodilator. Vasodilator means which dilates or which increases the diameter of the blood vessels, thereby pressure is decreased, which acts as ANP acts as a vasodilator, which is released by the cells in the atrium of the heart, auricle atrium of the heart, releases this ANP, which is responsible for the decreasing of the blood pressure. In response to high blood pressure, the atrium of the heart releases this ANP, and thereby which decreases the blood pressure. How exactly which is decreasing means, in addition to this, which prevents the sodium ion reabsorption by the renal tubules, unlike the aldosterone and ADH, which increases the sodium reabsorption, whereas this ANP prevents the reabsorption of the sodium ion by the renal tubules. Therefore, the salt concentration is decreasing, blood pressure also decreasing, and decreasing the water reabsorption, thus act as diuretic. Antidiuretic hormone ADH increases the reabsorption of the water, whereas this ANP decrease the water reabsorption. And finally, this particular ANP inhibit or suppress the action of aldosterone, antidiuretic hormone, and renin. That is, these aldosterone, ADH, and renin are responsible for increasing blood pressure, and this ANP inhibit the action of these renin, aldosterone, and the AH. Thereby, the blood glucose is maintained. Suppose if there is an increased blood pressure, ANP is released. If there is a low blood pressure, the blood pressure is going down, then the renin acts, renin converts angiotensin into angiotensin 1, angiotensin converting enzyme converts angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2, which has a direct effect and which also triggers the secretion of aldosterone and ADH, and they show various physiological actions, thereby which increase the blood pressure. In the next class, we will be discussing the morphology, hormones, and their actions of the endocrine glands like pituitary, thyroid, parathyroid, and adrenal gland. Thank you.